Welcome, restless dreamer. You've just stepped into the shadows of sleep, where stories whisper and the darkness listens. I'm your guide tonight, your voice in the void, here to lead you gently into nightmares wrapped in lullabies. Before we begin, press like if you're brave enough, and subscribe for more midnight tales that blur the line between sleep and terror. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what hour has found you? Marked in Sycamore Ridge. Jack had never imagined his retirement would lead him to a nightmare. After 2 decades as a corrections officer, witnessing violence and despair behind prison walls, all he wanted was peace. Somewhere quiet, where the worst sounds were birdsong, not the clang of metal doors. So, when he found Sycamore Ridge, a tiny town tucked away in the Missouri countryside, it seemed like a fresh start. The drive out was long, past endless soy fields and rolling hills, down a narrow 2-lane road that seemed to stretch into another era. Sycamore Ridge wasn't marked on many maps. Its population was just over 1,000, and its streets were lined with aging ranch-style homes, each with wide yards and deep driveways. Jack bought a modest yellow house at the end of Sycamore Lane. It was nothing fancy, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a small deck in the back, but it was his. For days, Jack settled in, unpacking boxes and learning the rhythm of the town. Neighbors nodded politely, but conversations were brief, eyes often flickering away. Kids were rarely seen playing in yards. The diner served breakfast all day, and the single gas station with 2 pumps was a hub of quiet activity. The post office was the size of a shed. Everything was peaceful, but a peace that felt thin, like a calm held together by something fragile. One evening, about a week after moving in, there was a knock at Jack's door. Outside stood a man in his 50s, wearing a flannel shirt tucked neatly into faded jeans, holding a clipboard. "Evening," the man said, his smile quick and tight. "Name's Marvin, part of the neighborhood watch here. Just wanted to welcome you to the Ridge." Jack nodded warily. "Thanks. Just moved in last week." Marvin chuckled softly. "Saw the U-Haul. Looked like you had a lot to unpack. Well, we run a little watch group. Not official, but we keep an eye on things at night. No crime to speak of usually, but it never hurts to be careful." Jack asked if they needed volunteers. "Sure thing," Marvin said. "Just a shift once a week, midnight to 3 a.m. You drive your assigned loop, keep your eyes open. We give you a vest and a map. No need to get out of the car, just report what you see." The idea seemed harmless enough, and Jack figured it would help him meet people, maybe feel safer. He agreed. That Friday night was his first patrol. Jack loaded a thermos with coffee, put on an old playlist of classic rock, and set out with the reflective vest and the map Marvin had handed him. His loop covered 5 quiet streets, most with old trees arching overhead and houses tucked behind overgrown yards. Porch lights dotted the darkness. A man in a robe grabbed the paper. Another walked his dog and gave Jack a casual wave. It felt peaceful, almost therapeutic. Weeks passed without incident. The watch group met once a month in the community center, a bland room with plastic chairs and bad coffee. Marvin ran the meetings, always emphasizing, "Stay in the car. Observe. Don't intervene. We're the eyes and ears, not the hands." Jack noticed the other members. Carol, who took attendance like a schoolteacher, and Earl, a tall man who mostly watched silently. They all seemed to follow the same script, smiles polite but guarded. Then one cold October night, everything changed. Jack was driving down Brook Hollow, one of the farthest streets in his patrol, when he saw 2 men prying open the side door of a dilapidated house. The peeling gray paint and crooked blinds told a story of years neglected. One man crouched with a crowbar. The other glanced nervously before slipping inside. Jack's heart pounded. He pulled to the side, reaching for his phone to call it in. Suddenly, headlights flooded his rearview mirror. A black pickup rolled up behind him, silent and threatening. 3 men climbed out. One held a flashlight. Another carried something heavy. Jack froze as the tallest man tapped lightly on his window. He didn't roll it down. He threw the car in drive and sped forward, a sharp crack shattering the rear window. Shaken, Jack didn't stop until he hit Main Street, where the truck disappeared behind him. His hands trembled as he touched the spiderweb cracks in his glass. But the image burned into his mind was the man standing by the truck, calm under a street lamp. Marvin. Sleep evaded Jack that night. Dawn found him sitting in his kitchen, lights off, heart pounding. He called the sheriff. The dispatcher sounded uninterested. A deputy arrived hours later, polite but dismissive. "The house has been empty a while," the deputy said. "Might have been the owners or someone checking it out. No missing property, so no burglary." Jack pressed, mentioning Marvin's name. "Good guy," the deputy said. "Runs the watch. Don't worry about it." But Jack couldn't. After that day, the warmth of the neighborhood vanished. Carol ignored his texts. Earl avoided eye contact at the diner. Invitations to meetings stopped. The watch group erased him quietly. Marvin strolled past Jack's house several times a week, whistling softly, waving once. Jack didn't return the gesture. One afternoon, the black pickup sat idling 2 streets over. When Jack walked by hours later, it was gone. Doug, the neighbor Jack had barely spoken to, began mowing his lawn late at night. Not late enough to be illegal, but late enough to send a message. Jack secured his doors, bought stronger locks, installed a porch camera, but it kept disconnecting. One morning, a dead squirrel appeared in Jack's mailbox. No note, just fur and blood. Nights grew worse. Jack awoke to gravel crunching outside. Through the blinds, 3 shadowy figures stood silently at the driveway's edge. They didn't approach or knock, just waited. Jack realized something dark thrived in Sycamore Ridge. The neighborhood watch wasn't watching for criminals. They were the criminals. The watch used their patrols to mark empty homes, orchestrate break-ins, and silence anyone who dared question. The sheriff, the deputy, the diner owner, maybe even the realtor who sold Jack the house, were all in on it. Jack wanted to leave, but to leave was to admit defeat. Or worse, maybe the darkness would follow him. He had begun watching too, watching the watchers. The hydroelectric plant stood like a forgotten bunker at the edge of the Colorado wilderness, its concrete walls stained by decades of rain, snow, and time. Nestled between cliffs and surrounded by pine forests, it hummed quietly with power and isolation. It was exactly the kind of place Alice Monroe had hoped to disappear into. After 2 months in psychiatric rehab following a public breakdown during a 911 call gone wrong, Alice didn't want noise, people, or pressure, just solitude. The ad read, "Night shift technician needed. No prior experience required. Silence preferred." That last line felt oddly comforting. Her shift began at 12 a.m. Sharp. Each night, she passed 2 layers of security gates, crossed an underground corridor that reeked faintly of mildew and copper, and descended into the operations bay known as the shift room. Inside were 2 old control desks, dozens of blinking panels, and an aging industrial computer system that monitored the water turbines. Only 1 chair was ever used. Alice quickly fell into routine. Log water levels every hour, run diagnostic reports, file entries into the nightly log. It was boring. It was perfect. Until night 3. At exactly 2:08 a.m., Alice looked away from the monitors to jot down a reading. When she glanced back, she froze. There was a second chair beside her. Old, rusted, identical to hers. She hadn't heard anyone enter. She hadn't moved. It had simply appeared. The chair sat vacant, unmoving, yet felt impossibly present, like someone had just stepped away. Alice checked the camera feed. Only static. The intercom buzzed with brief, garbled white noise, then silence. She laughed it off. Maybe it had always been there. Maybe she just hadn't noticed. The next night, a mug sat on that chair's console. Steam coiled lazily upward. Dark roast. Black. Just how she drank it. She hadn't brought it. On night 5, the second console flickered to life on its own. Alice stared in disbelief as the screen glowed pale green, and a media player opened, unprompted. Her breath caught in her throat as the audio played. 911, what's your emergency? Please, he's not breathing. I think, ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Is he? It was her voice. One of her calls. The call that broke her. Her hands trembled. She yanked the power from the second console. The audio cut out, but the silence that followed was louder, heavier, judging. When she looked up, the coffee mug was gone. Night 7. The shift started normal. If anything about this was still normal. Alice entered the shift room. The second console was already on. She approached it slowly, warily. A voice whispered behind her. She spun. A woman was sitting in the second chair, silent, head down, fingers poised over the keyboard like she'd been working for hours. Alice's stomach dropped. It wasn't just a woman. It was her, paler, dark-eyed. Her face bore bruises she didn't remember earning. Her knuckles twitched. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. The other Alice didn't speak. She just typed. Alice backed away, left her shift early, drove home in silence. When she returned the next night, the other her was waiting. Alice reported the incident. The day supervisor blinked at her, confused. There's only one key card to that room. Yours. They checked the footage. Corrupted. The logs. Erased. Still, Alice tried to quit. But when she packed and left town, she woke up back in the shift room at 12 a.m. No memory of returning. No vehicle. Just her, the blinking monitors, and the hum of the turbines. The second Alice sat beside her now every night. She spoke rarely, but always with the same eerie line. You rest. I'll take over. Alice started to forget the outside world. Her apartment. Her name. Which version of her was real? Night 14. Alice, gaunt, sleep-deprived, unraveling, sat in silence while her double typed away. The shift room lights flickered. A low groan echoed from the turbines below. The consoles dimmed. And then the other Alice turned to her, smiling fully now. You're tired. Let go. Alice stared at her hands. Were they hers? She tried to remember the feel of sunlight, of running water, of a voice on the phone that wasn't her own. She couldn't. I'll do the work. You rest. The screen blinked with a final command. Transfer control, YN. She hovered her hand over the Y key. Alice's finger trembled over the blinking Y key. Behind her, the turbines groaned louder, like a beast stirring from the depths of concrete and water. The air grew thick, dense with static and something older, something watching. Her double waited, not smiling anymore, just patient. Alice's breath came in short gasps. Her hands were no longer her own. They felt foreign, pale, bruised. She tried to blink, but even her eyelids resisted, like she was trapped behind glass. You rest, the double whispered again. I'll keep the system running. The cursor blinked in time with her heartbeat. Transfer control, YN. Her finger twitched, and the screen accepted the input. Y. The room pulsed. The second console shut down. The turbines below roared like they'd swallowed something. A scream, or maybe just air, echoed through the pipes. Alice stood there, or rather, the other Alice did. The real Alice felt herself slipping, like sinking into a dark pool. Her body felt light, fading, like breath in cold air. And then, nothing. The shift room returned to silence. The monitors blinked calmly. The chair squeaked as the figure leaned forward to log the 2 a.m. water levels. Same uniform, same face, same voice. But something behind the eyes was different. Empty, maybe. Or worse, programmed. On the other side of the room, a security cam blinked red, recording for the first time in days. A night supervisor watched from above. Looks like she finally settled in, he murmured. He marked the clipboard. New technician. Transfer complete. System holding. Room 3 ready for next candidate. In a hallway far above the underground plant, another ad was quietly posted online. Night shift technician needed. No prior experience required. Silence preferred. In the dead of night, a young man in Denver scrolled through job boards. He frowned, clicked on the ad. Remote location. Night hours. Simple tasks. It sounded boring. It sounded perfect. He didn't notice the faint sound of turbines humming through his speakers. He didn't notice the screen flashing, just once. Transfer received. I was 17 when we left everything behind. My cousin Molly and I had just graduated high school, and before the ink on our diplomas was dry, we were packed into the back of my uncle's weather-beaten Chevy, watching the skyline of our hometown disappear behind us. We weren't running from anything, but we were running towards something, a chance to start over. My youngest Aunt Charlotte had married a man who owned a dairy farm out in a nowhere kind of place called Farrell, Texas. She said he needed help. Somehow, that small request turned into a mass migration. Grandparents, cousins, uncles, aunts, our whole family rolled into Farrell like a caravan. Farrell was the kind of town where stop signs outnumbered stoplights. and every person you passed waved, whether they knew you or not. Most of them did, or would by next Sunday. It was dry and dusty, but the air smelled like earth and sweet hay. When the wind blew just right, it carried the lowing of cows, like some distant, sleepy lullaby. My dad, Daniel, had been a farmer all his life. Dirt under his nails was just part of him, like the lines on his weathered face or the permanent tan on his neck. He fit right in with the other men of the town, but none quite like Rocky Thompson. Rocky was in his mid-50s but moved like a man decades younger. He wore the same threadbare overalls every day, one strap always undone, and a dust-covered cap that never left his head. His boots looked fossilized, but he could still beat you in a foot race across a field. Quiet and hard-working, Rocky was the kind of man who showed up early to help fix your tractor and stayed for dinner, with a pie he didn't make but pretended he did. Everyone in Fairhill knew Rocky. Most folks liked him. A few owed him favors. My dad loved him like a brother. They became partners fast, first at the dairy, then later when that shut down, starting their own wild game processing business. Thompson and Rayner Gameworks was a hit in a town where deer season was more sacred than Sunday service. I'd see them out in the fields, leaning against the bed of a pickup, sharing a thermos of burnt black coffee, laughing about something only they understood. Their friendship was quiet, deep, and unshakable. Then everything came crashing down on a hot Tuesday afternoon. My stepmom, Angela, was an EMT. Every week she stopped by Rocky's place to refill his weekly pill organizer. Just routine, really. But that day, she let herself in like always, and found him on the kitchen floor, clutching his chest. She tried. God, did she try. CPR, radioed for backup, the whole 9 yards. But Rocky was gone. The funeral was like something out of a Southern Gothic novel. Fairhill Baptist Church, the only one big enough to hold everyone, overflowed with old football buddies, hunting friends, church folks, and farmers from miles around. The air was thick with heat and grief. My dad sat stiff in the front pew, face unreadable except for his tightly clenched hands. I'd never seen him cry, not even when we buried my grandmother. But that day, when they carried Rocky's coffin out under the blazing sun, silent tears ran down his face. For a moment, he looked older than I'd ever seen him. After that, things started falling apart. Rocky's family, people we'd never even heard of, showed up asking questions about land, equipment, money. There were arguments, legal threats, and tensions rising in town. Business dried up. Dad tried to hold it all together, but you could see the weight wearing on him. The light in his eyes dimmed. Mornings came slower. The laughter stopped. Then, about 6 weeks after the funeral, I had the dream. It wasn't like other dreams. I wasn't in it the usual way, not talking, walking, or acting. I was just watching. The scene was vivid, more real than real. A wide open field, golden wheat swaying gently under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The kind of place that only exists in photographs or memories. And there he was, Rocky, but not as I remembered him. He looked young, maybe in his 30s. His blonde hair was thick and sun-kissed, no cap. He wore a clean blue shirt, buttoned all the way up and tucked into fresh jeans. His boots looked new. He was leaning against a wooden fence post, one hand resting on it like he'd just finished building it. There was no sound but the wind, and yet I heard him, or maybe I just understood. "I'm okay," he said. "I made it. I'm home." Then he smiled, turned to look at the field, and faded into it, like smoke caught on the breeze. I woke up with wet cheeks and a strange sense of peace, but I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. A year passed. We were out at Dad's place, sitting under the old pecan tree behind the house, drinking iced tea and watching the sky turn purple with dusk. The cicadas screamed like always. We were swapping stories, mostly about Rocky, because that's what we did now. Something inside me said it was time, so I told him every detail. He didn't say anything at first, just stared off into the distance, as if picturing that wheat field. Then he looked at me slow and said, "I never had a dream like that." I nodded. "I think Rocky came to me because he knew I'd wait until you needed to hear it." Dad took a long breath. His hand trembled as he wiped his eyes. He always did know what I needed before I did. I don't claim to understand what happened. I'm not into ghosts or signs or anything like that. But that dream, it wasn't a dream. I know that deep in my bones. It didn't happen to scare me. It didn't happen to start something. It happened to end something, to close the wound, to say goodbye. Years have passed since then. Dad's back to working the land, slower now, but steady. The game plant eventually shut down, but he doesn't mind. Says the pace suits him better. He kept Rocky's cap, hung over the corner of his shop's doorway. It's dusty, sun-bleached, and fraying at the edges. Every now and then, when the wheat's high and the wind's just right, I swear I can smell that faint dusty scent. Overalls and old boots and something stronger. Memory. Rocky never came back in a dream. Just that once. But once was enough. Because now, when Dad and I talk about him, there's sadness, but there's also peace. Not everything broken can be fixed, but sometimes it just needs to be let go. And in a small town with quiet fields and golden wheat, that's enough. That's home. Hollow Creek, Kansas, was the kind of place that seemed forgotten by time. Fewer than 60 people lived there now, mostly farmers and retirees clinging to the slow rhythm of the land. The main street had a rundown gas station, a diner that smelled like old grease and coffee, and a tiny grocery store that still had faded signs from decades ago. No one locked their doors, and news traveled slower than the wind that rustled through the endless fields. My name's Jack, and I've got two best friends, Mia and Lucas. We grew up together on Willow Lane, a quiet street that curls around the edge of town and leads out to the sprawling prairie beyond. We spent our childhood chasing fireflies, exploring abandoned barns, and dreaming of anything more than the quiet boredom that filled our days. One chilly April morning, just as the sun was stretching its fingers over the horizon, Lucas showed up at my porch wearing his old varsity jacket, and that crooked grin that always meant something was about to happen. "You ready?" he asked, voice low and excited. "Let's do it," I said, grabbing my backpack with the essentials, a football, a pocket knife, and a water bottle. We picked up Mia, who was already waiting on her porch, boots muddy from yesterday's rain and her hair tucked under a knit cap. No words were needed. This was our usual. We wandered through the tall prairie grass, the golden stalks swaying like waves in the breeze. It was our playground, but today, Lucas spotted something strange in the distance, an old green station wagon, half swallowed by the grass and vines. "How does a car just get out here?" Mia whispered as we approached it cautiously. The paint was faded and peeling, the windows cracked and clouded. The wooden panels along the side were warped and rotting. There was no road leading to it, no tire tracks in the dirt, just the forgotten grass all around. I reached the door handle and pulled. It groaned open, releasing a puff of stale, dusty air. We climbed inside, laughter trying to mask the unease creeping over us. Mia settled in the driver's seat, Lucas took the back, and I slid into the passenger side. As I shifted my foot, I felt something soft and unnatural under the seat. Moving aside an old soda can, I found a clump of coarse black hair. My heart slammed. Then I noticed the fabric near the seatbelt, a jagged tear crudely sewn shut, as if hiding a wound beneath. "We need to tell someone," I said quietly. Lucas laughed nervously, brushing it off. Mia's eyes were wide, serious. Outside, rain began to fall, cold and relentless. The next day, I told my father about the car and what I'd found. He promised to call Sheriff Benson, who came out that afternoon, listened to our story, and said they'd send a team to investigate. That night, while we played cards in Lucas's basement, his mother came down to say the sheriff was there again. Sheriff Benson's face was grave. "We found a body," he said quietly. The victim was identified as a man who had disappeared years ago, a drifter from Colorado, last seen near these parts. The town buzzed with fear. Parents kept their kids close. The prairie, once a playground, felt suddenly like a trap. Mia began having nightmares of a shadowed figure wandering the tall grass, calling her name. Lucas felt eyes watching him from the darkened fields. I found an old leather-bound journal in my grandmother's attic, filled with notes about the Watcher, a restless spirit guarding the secrets of Hollow Creek, and rituals to appease it. One evening, we returned to the station wagon at dusk, clutching the journal and our courage. As we recited the strange words, the wind rose, the grass whipped around us, and a shadowy figure emerged, the Watcher, angry and sorrowful. It told us of a terrible crime, of a life stolen and buried beneath silence and fear. The air grew heavy, but together, we broke the curse, releasing the trapped soul. The car rusted away as dawn broke over Hollow Creek. The town began to heal, its dark secret finally told. Mia, Lucas, and I, changed forever, vowed to protect our home, knowing some secrets in the grass will always whisper to those who listen. They say small towns are quiet, but Hollow Pines is too quiet. When I moved here 6 years ago, I thought I'd found peace. No traffic noise, no neon lights, just winding roads and the whisper of pine trees swaying in the wind. But I've learned something about quiet. It's never truly empty. Sometimes quiet is where the darkness speaks, and I heard it. The first time was the night Margaret died. Margaret was my neighbor, a stubborn old woman who had lived in Hollow Pines all her life. She was the kind of person who believed in things no one else did, like omens, curses, and the black trees. Whenever we crossed paths on my evening walks, she'd stop me, lantern flickering, and say, "Don't wander past the black trees when the wind dies. That's when the whispers come." I always laughed it off. Just another creepy old town story. But when she died last winter, found lifeless in her cottage at the wood's edge, I couldn't stop hearing her voice in my head. The night after her funeral, I couldn't sleep. The sky outside was perfectly still, no wind, no sounds. Even the pine branches, always swaying, stood frozen like someone had pressed pause on the world. That's when I heard it. I froze. The voice didn't come from outside. It came from inside my house. "Hello," it said again. Soft but too close, like someone leaning over my ear. I shot up from bed, heart pounding. My house is small, with one hallway leading to the front door, and I'm the only one living here. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep near my bed and crept down the hall. The whisper came again, from the darkness near the front door. "Please, come." I tried the light switch. The bulb flickered once, then went dead. The silence after that felt alive, like the whole house was holding its breath. I looked through the peephole, expecting. I don't even know what I expected. But there was nothing, just my empty porch and the gravel road beyond. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, bat in hand, waiting for the whisper to come back. It didn't, not until the next night. The next morning, I went into town. Hollow Pines isn't much. One diner, a gas station, and a general store run by a man named Bill. I told him about the whisper. Bill's face drained of color. "You heard them," he said, voice low. "The whispers. They always come after someone dies." I laughed nervously. "What, like ghosts?" Bill shook his head. "Number not ghosts. Worse. Don't listen when they talk to you. And for God's sake, don't answer them." I thought he was joking. I wish he was. The second night, I left the TV on, hoping noise would drown out my paranoia. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the power went out. Everything went black. Then I heard it again. "We know you hear us." The voice was deeper this time, almost like it was speaking from inside the walls. I grabbed my phone to call 911. No signal, not a single bar. Something moved in the kitchen. Barefoot steps, dragging slightly across the linoleum. "She's waiting for you, just outside." I don't know why I did it, but I went to the front door and looked out. At the edge of the trees, about 30 feet away, I saw her. Margaret, or something wearing her face. Her head tilted unnaturally to the left, her neck bent as though broken. Her eyes reflected the porch light, two pale white glimmers. She smiled, too wide, teeth jagged like splintered glass. "You heard us," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "Come with me." I slammed the door and locked it, shoving a chair under the handle. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The next morning, I went to see Sheriff Davis. He didn't laugh. He didn't even look surprised. "Did they call your name?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just told me to come outside." His jaw tightened. "If they call your name, don't answer. The moment you do, you belong to them." I left more scared than I'd been before. That evening, I drove past Margaret's abandoned cottage. The windows were boarded up, but on the side of the house, someone had carved deep into the wood, "Don't listen when they whisper." By the third night, the whispers weren't just one voice. There were dozens, all layered, like a crowd just outside my door. "Come out. We see you. You hear us, don't you? We're waiting." I tried to drown them out with music, but the voices cut through it, sharp and clear. Then I heard my name. Alex. It was Margaret's voice, but wrong. Stretched, distorted, as if her throat was filled with smoke. Alex, open the door. We're friends. Come see the dark with us. I clamped my hands over my ears and yelled, "Leave me alone." The whispers stopped. At 3:33 a.m., the front door handle started to turn. Slowly, then harder. Something was trying to get in. The whispers came again, but now they were inside the house, inside the walls. You shouldn't have spoken to us. The lights flickered on for half a second, and I saw them. Shadows. Long, thin shapes with too many arms. Faces stretched into black holes. They slid across the walls like liquid darkness, moving closer. I bolted. I don't even remember grabbing my truck keys. I just remember the sound of the back door slamming as I ran. When I started the engine, a whisper came from the passenger seat. "You can't outrun us." I left Hollow Pines that night and checked into a dingy motel 2 towns over. The room smelled like mildew and bleach, but at least it was quiet. For 3 days, I stayed there, too scared to go back. Then Bill called me. "They're asking for you," he said. "Your name. People have heard it in the woods." I told him I wasn't coming back. "They'll find you, Alex. The whispers always do," he replied. Last night, it happened again. At 2:13 a.m., I woke to hear a whisper just behind the motel's bathroom door. "Alex." The doorknob turned, slow and deliberate. "You belong to the dark now. I'm writing this from inside the bathroom, with the lights on and the door locked, but I can hear them outside. The voices are closer now, pressing against the walls. They're whispering my name over and over. Alex, Alex, Alex. If you ever hear a whisper in the dark, don't listen, don't answer, because once they know you can hear them, they'll never stop." The rain never seemed to stop in Blackwater Bay. It tapped relentlessly against the windshield as Mara sat in the passenger seat of her mother's rusting Subaru, watching the crooked shoreline blur behind droplets. Everything about the town seemed faded. The peeling white signs, the sagging roofs, even the people looked washed out, as if the sea had drained the color from their bones. "Fresh start," her mother said again, forcing a hopeful smile. Mara said nothing. Chicago was gone. Her friends, her father, her art class, her real life, traded for a gray town with gulls that never stopped screaming. Their new home was a slanted blue cottage that smelled of wet wood and sea rot. The wallpaper was bubbled from years of salt air, and the wind howled through unseen cracks. Mara's bedroom faced the cliff edge. Below, waves crashed violently against black rocks, each impact like a heartbeat in the earth. She didn't unpack. She just sat by the window, sketchbook open, pencil still. Blackwater High was small, just one hallway and a gym that doubled as a lunchroom. The other students barely noticed her, except one. He sat in the back of every class, drawing with an old mechanical pencil, head bowed like he was praying. Elliot, pale, lean, with ink-stained fingers and eyes like wet ash. No one spoke to him, but his presence was undeniable, like a shadow in your peripheral vision. One day, during art class, Mara sat beside him. She glanced at his notebook. Inside were pages filled with portraits, each one hyper-realistic, too realistic, faces frozen in fear. Some looked familiar, but she couldn't say why. "You draw well," she offered. Elliot looked up, startled, then offered a shy smile. "So do you." That was how it began. They started talking after school. He loved old horror comics, charcoal art, and ink that bled when water touched it. He never talked about his family. Rumor said his parents were gone, but no one knew where. One Friday, he invited her to his house. "To draw," he said. "The view's better up there." The house sat alone on a cliffside, a Victorian relic leaning dangerously toward the sea. Inside, it smelled like mold and turpentine. Old portraits hung crooked on the walls, and the air felt heavy, like breathing under wet blankets. He led her to his studio, a wide room with floor-to-ceiling windows and stacks of sketchbooks. No power, just candlelight and silence. "Do your parents live here?" she asked. "No," he said quietly. "Not anymore." She should have left. While Elliot was in the kitchen making tea, Mara wandered. She opened a drawer. Inside, dozens of Polaroid photos. Some were old, faded, snapshots of people standing near the lighthouse, the diner, the boardwalk. Some had "missing" scrawled across the back. Curious and unnerved, she stepped into a small side room, the only one with a locked door that had been left slightly open. Inside, it smelled like old paper and salt. Dozens of portraits hung on the walls, not framed, pinned, raw paper curling at the corners. They were haunting, terrified eyes, silent screams, expressions frozen in the moment of realization. And then she saw her own face, drawn in pencil, unfinished, hair perfect, eyes only half complete, lips open as if whispering a final plea. She backed away, knocking over a stack of books. That's when she heard Elliot's voice behind her. "You weren't supposed to see that." Mara turned slowly. Elliot stood in the doorway, teacup in hand, but the smile was gone. "It's not what you think," he said, voice tight. "It's not me. The book, it shows me things. People." She didn't move. "I dream them first. Then I draw. And then," his voice broke, "then they vanish." Mara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "You mean, you kill them?" He looked horrified. "Number, I try to stop it. But once I start sketching, I can't stop. It's like something's controlling me. Like the ink wants them." She ran for the door. She tore through the hall, knocking over a stack of ink bottles, her shoes slick on the warped wood. The house shifted around her. Hallways stretched. Doors led to nowhere. The air thickened, as if the house itself didn't want her to leave. Behind her, Elliot screamed, "You don't understand. It'll come for you now." She reached the front door. Locked. Of course. She turned left, into what should have been the kitchen, and found herself back in the studio. Only now, all the walls were covered with versions of her face. Each sketch showed her at a different moment, laughing, crying, screaming. The most recent showed her in this exact moment, eyes wide in terror, hand on the doorknob. She dropped the sketchbook, and then something began moving inside the ink. One of the portraits twitched, then another, and another. The drawn eyes rolled, the mouths opened. A chorus of silent screams rose around her, and from the largest drawing, a black smear in the shape of a figure with hollow eyes, something stepped out. Not drawn, not alive, somewhere in between. It was made of ink, but it moved like it had bones. Mara screamed. Elliot appeared behind her, clutching a lighter. "The ink only stops if we burn it." She stared at him. "Then burn it." He hesitated. "It'll take me, too." She didn't care. She grabbed the lighter and threw it. The sketchbooks ignited with a hiss. The flames weren't red. They were blue, the color of gas and ghostlight. The drawings writhed and curled, the ink screaming as it bubbled away. The shadow creature lunged, but Elliot stepped between it and Mara. "Mara, run!" She did. She ran through the hall, now straight, now mercifully short. The front door opened like it was waiting. She burst into the cold night, the wind ripping at her jacket, the smoke chasing her down the hill. Behind her, the house groaned and collapsed, swallowed by blue fire. Elliot never came out. It took weeks for the fire department to reach the ruins. They said the cliffs made access impossible. The official story was arson. No bodies found, no sign of Elliot, just a house full of old art and burnt paper. Mara returned home with her mother, but the dreams didn't stop. Every night she saw faces, new ones, strangers, and every morning her hands were stained with black, even though she never picked up a pencil. Then, one morning, she found it on her desk, a brand new sketchbook, with her name etched into the cover. County Road 19 was the kind of road that looked like it had been forgotten by time. At night, it stretched like a black ribbon through the cornfields, swallowed on both sides by tall, whispering stalks. The headlights of a single truck barely pierced the gloom. Daniel Miller had driven this road for years, but tonight, something about it felt wrong. Maybe it was the way the moon sat low and orange on the horizon, or maybe it was the silence, thick and unnatural, broken only by the hum of his engine. It was just past 1:10 a.m. when he spotted her. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, just the reflection of a pale scarecrow or a torn sheet stuck on a fence post. But as he drew closer, his stomach tightened. A girl. She was standing by the lone bus stop that sat crooked at the edge of the road. He knew this stop well. Nobody used it after 10 p.m., not unless they had a death wish. And yet, there she was, barefoot, her thin white dress soaked through as if she'd been standing in a rainstorm. The thing was, The sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. Daniel slowed down. His headlights fell across her face. Young, maybe 18 or 19, with long black hair plastered to her cheeks. Her eyes were hollow, rimmed with dark circles. He rolled down the passenger window. "You okay, miss?" he asked. She didn't answer. Not a nod, not even a glance. But when he stopped the truck, she stepped forward and climbed silently into the bed of his pickup, water dripping from her dress and pooling on the rusted metal. Something about her silence sent a chill through him. "Cold night, huh?" He tried again as he started driving. His voice felt too loud in the empty night. For a long moment, nothing. Just the hum of tires on asphalt. Then softly, she whispered, "They never let me leave." The words made his hands tighten on the wheel. "Who?" he asked, turning slightly to glance at her through the small window between the cab and the bed. But she was gone. Daniel slammed the brakes. The truck skidded on gravel as he pulled over. Heart pounding, he jumped out, circling the vehicle. Nothing. No girl. Not even footprints in the dirt behind them. The only thing left was the faint smell of wet earth. The next morning, Daniel went straight to Sheriff Walter Briggs. He felt foolish even saying it out loud, but something in the sheriff's reaction made his blood run cold. "You saw her, didn't you?" Briggs asked, eyes narrowing. Daniel froze. "What do you mean, saw her?" The sheriff leaned back in his chair, letting out a long sigh. "Girl in a white dress? Soaking wet? Looks about 19? Daniel nodded slowly. Briggs tapped the end of his pen on the desk. "You're not the first. Drivers call me about her at least once a year. Some claim she climbs into their car. Others say they see her standing in the middle of the road. But by the time they stop, she's gone." Daniel swallowed hard. "Who is she?" "Name was Emily Carter," the sheriff said after a pause. "Vanished back in 1991. House fire. Old farmhouse about a mile from that bus stop burned to the ground. Family said she ran out, but, well, nobody found her body. Folks believe her spirit still waits for a ride she'll never get." The sheriff's tone was calm, but Daniel could tell he wasn't joking. There was a weight in his voice, the kind that comes from too many nights hearing things you can't explain. Daniel tried to forget about the girl, but County Road 19 stayed in the back of his mind. He avoided it for weeks, taking the longer route home, but sometimes he thought he saw her anyway. In reflections, in the corner of his rearview mirror, a pale figure by the cornfields when he looked too long. Then came the night of November 12th. It was raining, the kind of cold drizzle that turned the world into slick black glass. His usual route was blocked by a fallen tree, forcing him back onto County Road 19. As his wipers fought the rain, he saw her again. Same bus stop. Same white dress, now clinging to her like a second skin. Her head tilted slightly, like she was listening to something far away. This time, Daniel didn't stop. His foot pressed harder on the gas. But when he checked the rearview mirror, his heart lurched. She was sitting in the front passenger seat. Her hair dripped water onto the seat, pooling dark stains. Her face was pale, lips slightly parted as if she were about to speak. "You missed my stop," she whispered. Daniel nearly swerved off the road. "What the hell?" She turned her head toward him. Her smile was too wide. Her teeth were wrong, jagged, sharp. He slammed on the brakes. The truck screeched to a halt, but when he looked at the passenger seat, it was empty. Only the seatbelt clicked softly, as if someone had just unbuckled it. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, those sharp teeth glistening in the dark. He could still hear the whisper, "You missed my stop." The next day, he went back to the sheriff's office. "I saw her again," he said, "but this time she was in my truck, sitting right next to me." Sheriff Briggs frowned. "That's new. She's never gone that far before." "What do you mean, gone that far?" The sheriff hesitated, then leaned forward. "There's a story. An old driver named Jack Thomas used to see her all the time. Swore she got closer every night, first at the bus stop, then in the truck bed, then one night, right in the cab. That was the last time anyone saw Jack. His truck was found in a ditch, driver's side door wide open. No sign of him." Daniel stared at him, stunned. "And you're telling me this now?" Briggs rubbed his face. "I told you never to drive that road at night." Nobody listens until it's too late. 2 nights later, Daniel's boss asked him to make a late delivery. He tried to refuse, but the route forced him down County Road 19. He told himself he'd just drive fast, keep his eyes forward, and not look at that bus stop. But at 1:12 a.m., the temperature inside the truck dropped. His breath fogged the glass. The radio hissed with static. Then came the sound of humming, a slow, off-key lullaby. Daniel gripped the wheel. Number not tonight. He pressed the accelerator, flying past the bus stop. But when he dared to glance in the mirror, his stomach dropped. She was there, sitting in the middle of the road he'd just passed. Her head slowly turned, following his truck, her smile stretching impossibly wide. Then a second later, she was gone. The road ahead shimmered with heat, though the night was freezing. And through the rain-smeared windshield, Daniel saw headlights, bright and blinding, rushing straight at him. He swerved, tires screeching. The truck spun out of control, slamming into a ditch. The impact knocked the breath out of him. When he lifted his head, dazed, he realized the road was empty. No headlights, no cars, just silence. Then, on the inside of his windshield, words began to form, written in condensation as if from a cold, wet hand. "You're next." Daniel quit his job the next morning. He told his boss, "I'm done with night routes. I'm done with County Road 19. But some nights, he swears he still hears her. When the wind is just right, he hears that off-key lullaby. Sometimes when he drives past old bus stops, he sees her, a pale girl in a white dress, dripping wet, smiling with teeth too sharp for any human mouth. And each time he feels like she's waiting for him to take one last ride." Ashford, Maine, is the kind of place you'd never notice unless you were lost. It's a blink-and-you-miss-it town. 2 diners, 1 post office, and a single stoplight that hasn't worked right since the early 90s. On the surface, it's harmless. But ask any local, and they'll tell you to stay far away from the old park on the northern edge of town. They won't say why. They'll just give you that look, a mix of fear and pity, as if they're remembering something too heavy to put into words. It started in the summer of 1987. The Ashford Town Council decided the park needed an upgrade. The playground equipment had rusted into dangerous, tetanus-coated death traps. The merry-go-round was the worst, a creaking, lopsided thing that made a noise like a dying animal when kids spun it. One sweltering July afternoon, the workers came to tear it down. They dug around the base of the structure, pulling out weeds and rotted boards. One of them, a man named Carl Bennett, hit something solid under the dirt. At first, they thought it was just an old drainage system, but when they cleared more dirt away, they found a circle of ancient stones, a well. It was deeper than any of them expected. When they pried off the rotting wooden boards covering it, a smell came out, damp, metallic, and foul, like something had been rotting down there for years. Carl shined his flashlight into the darkness, but the beam didn't touch the bottom. It was just an endless black throat, swallowing the light whole. That's when they saw the chains. Heavy, rusted links hung from the inner walls of the well, wrapped around the stones as if they'd once held something, or someone down there. The stones themselves bore deep scratches, like fingernails had scraped them raw in desperation. The workers didn't stick around to investigate. By the next day, the town had the well sealed with a concrete slab. They told people it was for safety. But in Ashford, rumors grow faster than weeds. Kids are stupidly brave, especially when you tell them not to do something. The well became the town's dark legend overnight. Parents warned their kids to stay away, which of course made it the perfect place for dares and midnight meetups. The story goes that 3 boys, Jamie Foster, Eric Vaughn, and Kyle Thompson, decided to test the legend in August of 1987. They were 14, too young to believe in curses, too old to ignore the lure of proving their courage. The boys brought crowbars and hammers, determined to break through the concrete seal. It wasn't as hard as they thought. The town's patch job was sloppy. Within an hour, they'd pried enough chunks loose to reveal a jagged opening. Jamie later said the moment the air from inside the well hit them, everything changed. The temperature dropped. The night went silent. No crickets, no wind, just the sound of their breathing and the faint metallic rattle of the chains below. Kyle laughed it off. "Probably just some old sewer," he said. He leaned over the edge and spat, listening for the splash. There was none. That's when the whispers began. Jamie swore he heard a voice calling his name, faint, like it was echoing up from the bottom of the well. He thought it was Eric at first, but when he turned, Eric's face was pale. "You heard that too?" Eric whispered. Kyle grinned nervously. It's just the wind. But the whispers grew louder, overlapping voices, dozens of them. Words Jamie couldn't understand, hissing, chanting, like some language older than the town itself. Something moved in the dark. Jamie didn't see it clearly, just the glint of wet, pale skin and the faint sound of something dragging chains. Then Kyle screamed. Jamie ran. He didn't look back. He didn't stop until he was pounding on his front door, barefoot, with blood on his knees from falling on the pavement. When his parents found him, he was shaking, whispering, "It's still hungry." The next morning, the police searched the park. They found no sign of Eric or Kyle. The tools the boys brought were gone. No footprints, no scraps of clothing, just the well, silent and sealed again, as if it had never been touched. Jamie never spoke about that night again. Not to the police, not to his parents. He left Ashford the day he turned 18 and hasn't returned since. A few weeks after the boys disappeared, families living near the park started complaining about strange noises. They'd hear the clinking of chains late at night, dragging across stone. Sometimes there'd be whispers, low, urgent voices that seemed to seep out of the ground itself. Mrs. Tanner, who lived on Willow Street, swore she saw water seeping up through the soil, dark and oily, forming small puddles near the park. But when she checked in the morning, the ground was dry. Others said they'd seen shapes, tall, thin shadows moving under the trees when there shouldn't have been anyone there. The town council tried to cover it up. They ordered a full concrete seal over the well this time, pouring until it was nothing but a flat slab in the middle of the park. They even built a gazebo over it, thinking it might distract people. But no one goes near the gazebo anymore. In 2011, a group of teenagers decided to make a YouTube video about Ashford's haunted park. They brought cameras, flashlights, and crowbars, hoping to crack open the well for clicks and views. The video was uploaded, but it ends abruptly. It shows them joking, laughing as they chip away at the concrete. Then, one of them pauses, saying, "Do you hear that? There's a low sound, like metal scraping." Another voice whispers, "Closer." The camera shakes violently, and the last thing the footage captures is a hand, pale, wet, and wrong, slamming onto the frame. 3 of the teens vanished. The fourth, a boy named Tyler, was found the next day in the woods, curled into a ball, mumbling, "It's still hungry. It's always hungry." The video was taken down by the police, but copies still float around the darker corners of the internet. Every Halloween, the legend comes back to life. People claim they see dark water bubbling through the cracks of the gazebo floor, even though it hasn't rained in days. Some swear they hear voices whispering from below, soft, pleading voices calling for help. One girl said she leaned close to listen and felt a cold breath against her ear, as if something beneath the concrete was whispering her name. A few years ago, someone spray-painted across the gazebo, "Feed it." No one knows who did it. The town painted over it, but the letters kept coming back, carved deep into the wood. Today, Ashford Park is quiet, but it's the kind of quiet that feels watched. Kids avoid it after dark. Parents warn newcomers, "Don't go near the old well. Don't even think about it." The sheriff, who's been in town for over 30 years, once said over a beer, "We've lost too many to that thing. You can bury it, you can seal it, but some things don't stay buried. They wait." If you visit Ashford, you'll see the park. The gazebo stands in the center like any normal structure. But if you listen, really listen, when the wind dies and the night is still, you might hear it. The metallic clink of chains, the soft scrape of nails on stone, and beneath it all, a voice whispering from the darkness, "I'm still hungry." Coldridge, Wyoming, isn't the kind of place that draws attention. It's a stretch of prairie broken by a handful of dusty roads, a single gas station, and wide, endless skies that seem to swallow sound. But if you ask anyone in town where not to go, they'll tell you the same thing. Stay away from the house on Cedar Lane. It's been empty for 50 years, but somehow, it doesn't feel abandoned. The story starts in the summer of 1973, when the Watterson family moved into the 2-story farmhouse at the end of Cedar Lane. The Wattersons were ordinary. George worked construction, Mary taught at the local elementary school, and their 2 children, Grace, 7, and Thomas, 5, were quiet kids who spent their afternoons playing in the yard. Neighbors remembered how happy they seemed during that first week. George waved to everyone from his truck. Mary brought over a pie to the woman across the road. Grace and Thomas played tag under the elm trees, laughing until sunset. On the seventh day, they were gone. Not moved out. Not relocated. Gone. When the neighbors noticed that the curtains hadn't moved in days, Sheriff Allen was called in. He found the front door unlocked. Inside, the house was wrong. Dinner was still on the table, plates of chicken and mashed potatoes, untouched, as though the family had just stepped away mid-bite. There were no signs of struggle, no packed bags, no footprints leading out. In the upstairs hallway, Allen found something he never talked about in public. The wallpaper, once pale yellow, was covered with black handprints, dozens of them, small handprints, like those of children. But when Allen measured them later, they were far too small, even for Grace or Thomas. The prints weren't made of paint. Sheriff Allen called for backup, and while his deputy searched the second floor, he swore he heard something. A voice. It whispered his name. He froze, convinced someone was hiding in one of the rooms. "Who's there?" he called out. The voice didn't respond. It just whispered again, soft and close, like someone breathing against the back of his neck. The deputy said later that he heard the same thing. Both men left the house immediately. By the time the full investigation wrapped up, no evidence was found, no bodies, no blood, nothing to suggest where the Wattersons had gone. The case went cold. Over the years, the property changed owners half a dozen times. People tried to live there, but no one lasted more than a week. A couple from Denver bought it in 1981, planning to turn it into a bed and breakfast. On the third night, the husband ran to the neighbors, pale and shaking, saying someone was in the house. When the sheriff checked, the house was empty, but the couple refused to return. They claimed to see shapes moving behind the curtains, long, thin shadows that didn't belong to anyone. The wife said she woke one night to find a child standing at the foot of the bed, its face covered in soot, whispering something she couldn't understand. They left before dawn, abandoning everything. One of the most persistent rumors is that the windows of the Cedar Lane house breathe. People who pass by at night say they see condensation form on the glass, as though something warm and alive is inside. Sometimes, handprints appear on the windows, small, smudged ones that vanish when you look too closely. Teenagers dared each other to touch the house. A boy named Luke Adams swore that when he pressed his palm to the front door, he felt a heartbeat pulsing through the wood. 3 days later, Luke disappeared. His parents thought he ran away, but some kids in town said they saw him walking down Cedar Lane at night, barefoot, his eyes black as coal. In 1994, a paranormal group from Colorado came to investigate. They stayed one night, setting up cameras and motion detectors. Only one of them, Maggie Price, came out. Maggie's footage was confiscated, but a few pages of her journal leaked years later. She wrote, "It's not empty. The house knows you. It learns your voice. It whispers what you fear most. At 3:12 a.m., I heard footsteps upstairs. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, soft, bare feet running. Then a door slammed. But when I checked, all the doors were open. The last entry simply read, 'They don't want us to leave.'" The most famous sighting happened in 2008, when a delivery driver named Paul Reynolds passed by late at night. His truck broke down, and he had to walk the last mile. As he passed the house, he saw a child's face peering out from the upstairs window. Thinking it was a squatter, he approached the house, calling out, "Hey kid, you okay?" The child didn't move. When Paul stepped closer, he realized something was wrong. The child's eyes were black pits, and its mouth was stretched into an unnatural grin. The next thing he remembered, he was running, his flashlight clattering to the ground. He never retrieved it. In 2019, A group of teenagers from Coldridge decided to live stream a night inside the Cedar Lane house. The stream lasted 22 minutes. It starts with them laughing, exploring the dusty rooms. One girl jokes about the handprints on the wallpaper. Then, around the 18-minute mark, the camera picks up faint whispers. At first, it sounds like wind. Then, a voice clearly says, "Leave." The camera jerks. Someone screams. The last thing the stream shows is the staircase, dark, empty, and a pair of small, pale hands gripping the banister. The teens were never seen again. Today, the Cedar Lane house still stands, its roof sagging, its paint peeling into gray curls. The town has tried to demolish it twice, but the crews refuse to go near it. One foreman quit on the spot, saying he saw something moving in the attic window. People say that if you walk past at night, you'll hear faint crying from the second floor. Sometimes, you might hear footsteps pacing just behind the walls. The sheriff warns anyone who asks, "That house isn't empty. It's waiting. It's always been waiting." No one knows what the house wants. Some say it's the Wattersons, trapped there, screaming from the other side. Others believe the house itself is alive, feeding on whoever is foolish enough to step inside. I drove by Cedar Lane once, back when I was 17. My friends dared me to go up to the porch and knock. I remember standing there, the boards soft under my feet, the windows fogged as though someone had just been breathing inside. When I knocked, the sound didn't echo like normal. It was muffled, swallowed. And then I heard it. A whisper. My name. I ran and never went back. Pine Haven, Vermont, is a postcard town. White church steeples, red barns, and forests that look painted in autumn colors. But everyone who lives there knows the woods that border the town aren't as peaceful as they seem. The locals call it the Whistling Woods. The story goes back over 100 years. In the early 1900s, a man named Silas Bracken lived deep in the forest, away from town. He was a recluse, a hermit, the kind of man who spoke to no one, and who no one dared visit. They say he made wooden flutes, strange, twisted instruments carved with symbols that no one recognized. Children began to disappear. At first, it was just one, a boy named Thomas, who wandered too far while picking blueberries. Then, a little girl vanished while playing hide-and-seek. Over the next 2 years, 7 children were gone. Search parties scoured the forest, but all they ever found were strange footprints and the sound of a flute, playing a slow, eerie tune, drifting through the trees. The town finally snapped. They stormed Silas Bracken's cabin one night. It said they found wooden flutes hanging from the ceiling, each carved with the names of missing children. They burned the cabin with Silas inside, his screams echoing into the woods. But the whistling didn't die with him. Over the decades, hikers, hunters, and even local kids have reported the same thing. A soft whistling, like a flute, drifting through the woods when everything else is dead silent. It's never loud, one old logger told me. It's just enough to get under your skin, to make you turn around. The closer you get to it, the farther it moves, like it's leading you somewhere you don't want to go. And if you hear laughter after the whistling, you're already too late. In October 2019, 2 hikers, Megan and Tyler, disappeared while camping near Pine Haven. They were experienced hikers, well prepared, and had texted their families the night before. Search teams found their campsite 3 days later. The tent was zipped from the inside. Their sleeping bags were still warm, but their gear, compasses, lanterns, even their shoes, had been arranged in a perfect circle about 20 feet from the tent. One searcher swore he heard faint whistling while combing the woods. It wasn't carried by the wind. It felt deliberate, like someone was just out of sight, watching them. The hikers were never found. Pine Haven's sheriff, Mark Delaney, doesn't like talking about the woods. But when I asked him about the whistle, his face went pale. "Listen," he said, "you don't go into those woods at night. You hear a flute, you run. You don't look for it. You don't call out. Because if you do, you'll never come out." I thought it was just small-town superstition. Until last year. In the fall of 2022, I was traveling through Vermont for a photography project. When I heard the story of the Whistling Woods, I thought it would make a great documentary. I checked into a small inn on Main Street. The owner, an old woman named Ruth, looked horrified when I told her I planned to camp near the woods. "You're not from here," she said flatly. "People from here don't go into those woods. Not at night." I laughed it off. "You mean because of the whistling?" Her eyes narrowed. "It's not just whistling. It's him, Silas. He still calls for them, for the children." That evening, I hiked into the edge of the forest. The trees stood like dark pillars, their branches intertwined like fingers. By dusk, the woods were so silent that I could hear my own heartbeat. I set up my tent about half a mile in. The plan was to record the forest overnight, maybe catch some ambient sounds to use in my project. By midnight, I was half asleep when I heard it. At first I thought it was the wind, a faint, melodic sound, rising and falling in the distance. A flute. I sat up, heart pounding. It was so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Then it came again, slightly closer this time. I grabbed my recorder and stepped outside the tent. The woods were still, too still. Even the crickets had stopped chirping. The whistling floated between the trees. A slow, eerie melody, like a lullaby played wrong. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. The whistling stopped. I waited, breathless. Then, from behind me, closer this time, the flute started again. A few notes, high and sharp, echoing between the trees. I spun around with my flashlight, but the beam cut through nothing but empty woods. The whistle moved again. It was circling me. That's when I heard it. A faint giggle, a child's laugh, soft and distant. I froze. The stories were true. When I turned to run back to my tent, I stopped cold. My gear, my backpack, lantern, and camera wasn't where I left it. It had been arranged, in a circle. I hadn't heard a sound, hadn't seen anyone move it. The whistling started again, closer now. I don't remember dropping the flashlight, but when I picked it up and aimed it forward, there was a man standing among the trees. He was tall and thin, his skin pale as bone. His face was wrong, stretched too long, his mouth too wide. His lips split into a crooked smile. He was holding something, a wooden flute. The flute dropped to his side, but the whistling didn't stop. It was still coming from everywhere, all around me, as though the trees themselves were singing. The figure tilted its head and stepped forward. I ran. Branches tore at my arms and face as I sprinted through the woods, heart hammering in my chest. The whistling grew louder, faster, almost frantic, and behind it, I could hear that faint laughter. I don't know how I made it out. I remember bursting through the tree line, falling onto the gravel road that led back to Pine Haven. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't start my car for nearly a minute. When I finally looked back at the woods, I saw a pale figure standing just beyond the tree line, watching me. The whistling stopped. I left Pine Haven the next morning. The innkeeper, Ruth, didn't even ask what happened. She just looked at me with sad eyes and said, "You heard him, didn't you?" I didn't answer. The whistling woods are still there, waiting. Locals say that if you step too far in, Silas Bracken will lead you in circles, drawing you closer to where his cabin once stood. They say he wants company. They say the children who vanished are still out there, their laughter carried on the wind. And every now and then, when the forest is completely silent, you can hear that faint, haunting whistle. If you ever do, don't follow it. Don't even look for it. Just leave the woods, or you won't leave at all.